Hello and welcome to the Long Ways podcast. I'm Devin Windelspect.
And I'm Michael Windelspect.
And we are a father-son hiking duo out to hike the great long trails of the world. So it's been a couple of months again since our last recording. We actually have a good reason for this, as we always say. But the reasons are we've been on two different trips over the past couple of months. We were actually most recently in Belize together.
Yep.
Me and Dad, in the jungles of Belize, doing some work outside of the Long Ways podcast with kind of our sister organization, Inspire Adventures. Some exciting stuff happening there with rainforest conservation, working with local conservation groups, the Belize Zoo. So we just came back from one of those just a couple of weeks ago. And I did not go on our latest hike because for the first time we're talking today about a solo hike across England that our one and only Michael Windelspect completed on his own this April. So, Dad, you completed a solo hike of the Hadrian's Wall a few months ago. And, when we first started to think about a podcast on this, it was a little bit more fresh in your mind than in July. But, this has been the first time any of us really have done one of these long way hikes as a solo hike. So I kind of want to ask, why did you choose this hike? Why did you choose to do a solo hike? And we're going to start there today.
That's great, Devin. I mean, I think that hiking the solo hike was something that I needed to set out to do for myself. As a solo hike always is, right? You'll have these ideas, and we've worked with Max Adventures so many times, and I had come back from Slovenia. Slovenia was not one of my biggest accomplishments on a hiking trail, which we talked about in previous episodes, and I'm happy with. And it's a recognition of I'm not in it for the technical hikes. I'm not a technical guy. I'm not going to hike up, 30 pylons and then skitter down a mountain. Okay, that those days are probably not with me anymore. But there's always that idea that I could have done better. I could have done something different, and I want to be prepared. So that's one part of it. I need to be prepared for this long distance hikes. So after I left Slovenia, I came back and I realized I needed to get myself in shape to do these things better. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But not just, we've always felt challenges. Between almost, barbecuing to death in Dingle Way and then freezing to death 40 hours later. Okay. Or, torrential rains or,
In Aragonized case, the exposure on the top of the Alps in Slovenia, that was one of those.
Exactly. Exactly. You have to face these challenges and you have to come back and say, here's what I'm going to do. So I came back, and the other obstacle for me was the fact that I was facing 60. I was turning 60 years old, and I'm not ready to turn 60. But I'm going to, it happened, and I realized that I want to give myself a challenge. Okay. In that time frame, also my dad passed away. That was a very traumatic event for me, and I really wanted to set a goal for myself that I could focus for the next 90 days on to complete. Yeah. And so I picked something which was what I thought would be safe. Okay. Yeah. I would go hike the Hadrian's Wall path because we'd looked at that. You and I looked at this and talked about it. It's a really cool hike. It's different than what you and I have done, but it is really a good hike for a solo hiker. And I need to push myself outside my comfort zone. And I'm really happy that at 60, I'm still pushing myself to that level.
So why Hadrian's Wall in particular, though? Like, why did you pick this trail out of other trails in England or Ireland or Scotland?
I'm going to tell you the reason why. There's so many trails that came up, and you and I had conversations about this back when I started talking about this idea. I was going to solo hike something. I've read a bunch of books by Mark Adams, which is an amazing author. Okay, and being a writer myself, wanted to dive into the history and the culture of what I was hiking on. We've done a lot of these hikes, and we're getting a lot better on just discovering things that are happening. I realized the fact that the Hadrian's Wall path was something that I was intrigued by because I knew nothing about, well, who the heck Hadrian was. Okay. I mean, I knew he was a Roman emperor because, he was there, but it was really something that I felt as it was within my ability to accomplish. So, and I wanted to explore the history and build an experience to go ex to see these different things.
Yeah. We've been talking about you and I on some hikes throughout England. Surprisingly, this kind of hut to hut hiking or kind of bed and breakfast to bed and breakfast hiking that we typically do, it kind of got started in England.
Yeah.
It's called rambling in England. And we haven't actually, until this point, we've done some in Scotland, we've done some in Ireland. We've never actually done something in England before. So this was, any of our first time really hiking through England. I've done a little bit of hiking myself there, but not like multi-day hikes. Um, so Hadrian's Wall, I mean, that I think you should be able to explain this a little bit more, but it kind of runs right along the wall that used to be able to separate the Roman half of the British Isles from the what they would consider the barbarians up north. You want to tell us a little bit more about the wall, a little bit more about where this is in England and Scotland, because it doesn't really follow the border exactly.
No, it actually takes you from Wallsend on the far east coast to Bowery on Solway on the far west coast. And I'm sure I'm butchering these names,
Yeah.
but that's fine. But
And Wallsends by Newcastle.
yes, Wallsend's by Newcastle. Okay. And then the other
Yeah.
part's out about 20 miles outside of Carlisle. So you're basically imagining that Hadrian built a wall. And the interesting thing about Hadrian the emperor was the fact he was not one of these types of emperors who wanted to conquer property. He wanted to solidify
Mhm.
the the empire. He wanted to make sure that the
Yeah.
empire was stable. So his idea was to build this wall, which, by the way, okay, was not. And I have some pictures of it. In some ways, it was not an impressive wall. It was a symbol of Rome's strength. And then he would run people
Yeah.
back through checkpoints, like cities or castles, housesteads, a number of these different little areas where where people had to interact with the Romans. And in doing so, he actually started to build an economy on either side of the wall, right? Because you can't, you could obviously take over the wall in this certain point, but he wanted to build a stability along the border. Um, it was an interesting experiment, which didn't always work. Okay. And sometimes they moved the
Yeah.
wall north and sometimes they moved it south. The wall was, for its massive abilities, was very mobile. They moved over time on north and south. So
So yeah, I mean, tell us about so you started on the Newcastle side by Wallsend.
I
Um,
did. Yep.
and tell us about your experience hiking the trail. And what I'm really curious about is, you know, we've done these in groups of two or three, ever since we started this, either you and me, and then after the first one, you, me, and Eric. And there's something about, even when it's sometimes been just me and Eric hiking, which has happened occasionally, there's something about having someone else there that makes the experience of kind of going up into sometimes these really harsh environments, like the Scottish Highlands, the Slovenian Alps, or Mont Blanc, feel a lot less not dangerous, because there's always like a danger of hiking in these altitudes and like in these environments, but less you're less afraid of doing it because you have that support near you. And I was wondering what the experience of just like solo hiking for you is, because personally, I've never done a multi-day solo hike. I've hiked with, a bunch of 18-year-olds through Colorado, which was its own kind of dangerous. Um, and, and I've hiked with
That
you,
was too.
but I've done like a couple of other like multi-day hikes, but I've never solo hiked like this. So what was the experience of solo hiking it? And what was the experience of hiking Hadrian's Wall?
It was not what I expected. It was more challenging than I thought it would be, mostly because these were, as we do the site to site hiking. Um, I knew every night I had a place to stay, okay, and obviously a bed and a breakfast and stuff like that, and get up the next day. It was challenging because um, over all of our hikes, I've relied upon you and Eric for certain portions of our hiking. I mean,
Well, I'm the navigator.
You're
We
the
know that.
navigator, and then when you tell me 45 minutes, I know that we're actually screwed, and it's going to be like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. And that's fine.
that's how it
Okay, it
works.
works. He's like 45 minutes, like, yep, we're not doing that. It's not going to happen. But there became this idea each day to be better prepared, um, to talk a little bit more with the people around me, because I hiked in early April from east to west on the Hadrian's Wall path. And if you go Google that, every person on the planet would say that is not the way to do anything. Okay. That
Yeah.
was absolutely the dumbest way to do it. And I did it. But it was really a challenge for me to set my daily goals. And those daily goals were set upon our hiking things. I mean, there have been times when we first hiked Mont Blanc or Portugal or anything where we sat back and we're like, today's not going to be fun. Hiking is not necessarily fun. I don't understand why people think it is. It's not. It's a challenge. It
Yeah.
is a mental challenge. For me, it was dealing with mud and water and a horrible wet season and interacting with the people on my trip who helped me get through that. But there was times that I wanted to give up, and I realized there was nobody there to help me. It wasn't like I was hiking with you or Eric. Okay, and I'm like, okay, well, I have 2 miles to go, and I'm sitting here, and I'm looking at a sheep. Okay. And I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure the sheep's not going to help me. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And and it became really inspirational. As, it was not the technical hikes we dealt with in Slovenia, Mont Blanc, which was probably one of the biggest elevation changes hikes we've ever dealt with. Um, but
Hmm.
it was a mental one, and I'm happy for that. I'm happy for the fact that
Yeah.
there were times that I stepped back and I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a bus from here to there. Usually under the advice of somebody like, you don't want to be walking this today. Yeah, take a bus.
Yeah.
But then I did that. And then I think it was really inspirational for me to be able to walk the hike. And the thing is that you and Eric were never far from that. I was like, oh my God, they would love to see this. I mean, because
Hmm.
it was beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, Newcastle,
Well, I was actually
yeah, okay, Walls End,
I was
Newcastle,
going to ask about like, can you tell us about a little bit more about just like the structure of the
yes.
hike? So you start in Newcastle, and then where do you go from there?
Well, basically, you go to Newcastle, and you actually have to head
Newcastle famous for its
uh,
football
uh
team and nothing else,
and it's shipbuilding.
and it's
Yes, it
shipbuilding.
actually built more.
It's a big northern industrial
It
town,
used to
pretty
be.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is anymore. So in order to begin, though, you actually have to go out to head out to the east to go to a place called Walls End. So you go out to Walls End. It's supposed to be the start of the Hadrian's pathway. There's nothing there. Matter of fact, when you're standing there, I remember taking a video, which I'll post up on our site, like, where is this? And
Yeah.
then you hike into Newcastle, and you begin to realize something that Hadrian's Wall was built by the Romans, but it was been disassembled over the years to build cities such as Newcastle. So my first day encountering the wall was almost 3 days in. So when I walked out of Newcastle, there was nothing there. You're walking along basically the Tyne River, and there's nothing there. Okay, and eventually
Yeah.
you come to Hedron. Okay, Hedron on the wall, and it's the first time you actually interact with the wall. There's nothing
Hmm.
there.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of rocks on the ground. But then the middle third of the trip really becomes an exploration of the wall. You're actually walking along it. It's sitting alongside of you. That was great. And then when you get back into Carlisle, it becomes the other way. You're now back into a city. The wall would have been disassembled for rocks for houses. And you're following the basic idea until you get out to the far west portion of it. Um, it the wall was impressive. If you see the way that the Romans built it in the areas they built it, some of these castles, when I was outside of some of these towns, they they were impressive places. the fact that they had
Yeah.
legions up on top of these cliffs. And there's not going to be a road behind them. These people were out there, and I remember seeing something saying that all this, everything was, all the fires were powered by firewood. I'm like, there's no trees. Obviously the Romans were bringing lumber in to supply people with it. It was impressive, and it made me really get interested in the historical hiking part of it as we begin to set ourselves for the Lycian Way coming up.
Well, I mean, I just want to kind of touch on that part. I'm thinking about every hike we've done, especially because we've been doing them in Europe. It's a little different in the States. But even in the States, there's like some history there. But every hike we've done have been like really steeped in history. Like the first one we did in Mont Blanc, there was a moment I remember we were
Uh-huh.
coming over the border between France and
Yep.
Italy, and you see the
Oh
gun
my God.
emplacements from World War
That was
II
amazing.
when it was pointed over. But it's not just that, Ireland, you're going by like a castle that was created by like Oliver Cromwell
Exactly.
during the invasion of
Exactly.
Ireland. Portugal, we went by this castle called Algezar, or like literally the island, which peninsula island, um, that is still there in the middle of the city, but it wasn't created by the Portuguese. It was created by the Muslim Moors who had occupied this, in the early 900s, even like Slovenia, there's a time where me and Eric came by an old World War One hospital, and actually Ernest Hemingway was fighting on the opposite side of the
Yeah.
mountains from this hospital. We were on the Austrian side, and he was on the
Right.
Italian side. And so you were kind of like there at the front lines of World War One, which were being fought in these mountains where we're at. And I think one of the coolest things about these hikes is the opportunity to really, you're literally walking in the footsteps, and in a way that you don't get with driving sightseeing. You're walking in the footsteps of thousands and thousands of people who came before. When you're hiking in Ireland, some of those paths were created by sheep farmers centuries before, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's one thing that I would say is that when hiking Hadrian's Wall path, it's like hiking the Appalachian Trail where we're at. You see the Appalachian Trail, and for like 200 yards, it's paved and
Hmm.
people are walking it. When you get 3 miles in, 4 miles in, and you're standing up on top of this ridge, okay, and it's
Hmm.
desolate, and you see what they call turrets. So the Romans called them turrets. It was basically an area where three men, okay, would stay, okay, and their idea was the fact that they were going to watch out to see what's happening out there. But you realize there's no
Yeah.
telephones, there's no cell phones. If there was somebody coming across, well, they were done. Okay, so, but how that life would have been there, the
Hmm.
cultural part of it was one of the most enriching things, as it's been for all of our hikes, every single time.
I mean, I think that's exactly, I get this feeling on these hikes sometimes, which you sometimes get in the States, but you especially get, going through these periods of history, which is just this kind of sitting and realizing that history is very long almost, and that
Uh-huh.
we're almost like a small part of that history. Because you think you're sitting there in Hadrian's Wall, and you're thinking a Roman soldier manning Hadrian's Wall would have thought that he was in his version of the end of history. He was manning
Yeah.
the bastions of the Roman
Yep.
Empire. That obviously that was the end of everything. You had created the Roman Empire.
Yep.
And I think about that sometimes when we're hiking these things, is that like at every period of time that we're walking through, at some point, again, another good example is the Muslims of southern Spain. They were like, this is the pinnacle
Yep.
of civilization, and for good reason during the Dark Ages in Europe until their own civilization collapsed. And so you're walking through the history of people who, in their own lives, it was the end of history for them. And I always found
Yep.
that really, really, really cool that you get to just walk through, I don't know, walk through this. You get to reflect on history in a way that you otherwise, would have a hard time doing, because you have those miles to sit and reflect and walk.
Exactly. Exactly. When you see something, it's not you're just in a car
Yeah.
and you see it and then it's
It's not just
gone.
sightseeing. It's
And
you,
no, you have to walk it.
yeah,
And when you walk to something, you appreciate it far more than if you took a car to it.
yeah.
And I think that Mont Blanc was our first experience. All of them. have
Yeah.
been just simply amazing.
Well,
And this one was too.
I was gonna ask, you talked to the challenges, going back to like the hiking thing and not the history. You went to the challenges of solo hiking, but what were like some of the unexpected benefits of solo hiking that you found?
Well, I think a lot of it was so. First of all, I had to prepare for this. Okay, yeah. I After coming out of Slovenia, my physical condition and my weight and everything were not ideal, and that was something I had to be realistic with at turning 60, and I had to turn around and I set a goal, okay, for accomplishing this. In order to go hike Hadrian's Wall path, I had to drop weight. Like there's
Hmm.
only one way to do that. I
Yeah.
had to go out and hike constantly.
Yeah.
Okay. And luckily, as you know, I mean, we live in a part of the world where you can do that. Okay. And I did that. And I think that
Yeah.
the other parts of it were to mentally prepare yourself to deal with, to get inside your head. Okay. But also to go ahead and walk along it. But it was basically the preparation which got me through this whole thing. Okay. I knew, okay, that I could do it. Okay. I
Yeah.
knew that I could. Okay. And so when I walked on the day, unless the weather was terrible, and there were
Hmm.
2 days where actually the people I was staying with, the bed and breakfast, said, for the love of God, do not go on that trail today. Okay. It's going to be mud up to your nose. Okay. I was like, okay, what do I do? And
Yeah.
I took a train to one spot one time and, backtracked. I mean, I hiked every aspect of Hadrian's Wall path, but I think that the challenge was to set yourself mentally you can do this type of thing. Solo hiking is a great place to
Yeah.
just relax and just walk.
I remember that I had one day in Portugal because your guys' flight was delayed, where I had to hike the first part alone. And there was
Yeah.
something actually really meditative about that and really relaxing. You take things when you're hiking with a group, you always have to like one person's a little faster, one person's a little slower. You always all have to like sit and like make stops, make breaks. And there's something really good about the camaraderie, but there's something really nice about taking things at your own pace, stopping when you want to, sitting and looking at something for as long as you want to. And I remember that being very, very nice too.
And you've done these types of hikes before in when you were in Northern Ireland, where you went and hiked along
Hmm.
these long distance things. And I think that it really is beneficial to do these types of hikes sometimes solo. Um, don't get me wrong. The fun of being with the group is the dynamics
Yeah.
of the group. Okay, it's the stupidness of it. It's the idea that here we go. We're doing all this
Yeah.
stuff, but there is also this idea that you can do these types of things if you set a goal out, accomplish these things. I think that it really was beneficial to me to go walking. There were some pretty funny things along the line.
I mean, you saw the tree that got cut down, didn't you?
Yes, I did. So the sycamore tree. So I actually approached that. That was an interesting portion of the trail because you're actually following the wall, the real wall. Okay. And you drop down into this little valley, and the
Yeah.
sycamore tree had been cut down. I mean, there's a lot of political things going out there, but they had been chopped down. Okay.
This is this
And
really famous sycamore tree that sits in like the dip of the wall. There's
yeah,
a lot of photos of it, and it was cut down last year, I believe.
it was. It was actually in a movie, the Robin Hood movie, which is where it
Yeah.
became famous. Okay, and it had been cut down completely. I mean, like, and this is a pretty massive tree, and it's an impressive hike from there. You're actually coming out of Housesteads, heading down to what's called a town called Once Brewed,
Hmm.
and the restaurant there or brewery, which is the only thing in town, is called Twice Brewed. Okay, and it was a pretty amazing spot, but you have to hike through that area. Um, and it was pretty sad because you remember seeing that tree and it was cut down. But when I was there was a student group making a documentary of the tree. And come to find out that because it's a sycamore tree, right, they can actually been able to clone it. So
That's
they've been
cool.
able to clone these pieces of this tree. And just a couple weeks or month ago, they came and removed the old stuff. Their ideas are going to replant this
Yeah.
sycamore tree in the spot, and it's actually really impressive. The these aren't these aren't Slovenia level hikes up and down, but
Hmm.
they have some definite vistas. And this
Yeah.
is an impressive little spot where this tree was. And it was great to see it and see the students there and actually talk with them a lot about what they were doing because it was obviously a film group
Yeah.
from a student group. And it was fun. It was fun. It was great. Yep.
Well, I mean, you've talked to me about wanting to do more, you have a little bit more flexibility than me. I have my 9 to 5 job and I can only really make these hikes once a year, but you've talked about doing 2 hikes a year even, and maybe doing some more solo hikes in the future. Is that still something you want to do?
I do. I think I want to go ahead and keep challenging myself to go ahead and do more of these and write about them and write about my experiences. The people I met, there's some really interesting people I met on the Hadrian's Wall path, which are, they're characters, all right. But write about them. But there's also something about our Turkey trip. I'm looking forward to the three of us getting back on the trail together. There's this idea that we've accomplished these things, and I'm so absolutely happy and you know and grateful for the fact that I get to do this with you and Eric. I mean, it's fun. But sometimes you got to take the trip yourself. Sometimes you just got to walk on the trail and say, it's 85 miles.
Hmm.
I can do this, and I'm going to walk it. And, okay, and I did it. And did I do the whole thing?
Yeah.
Technically, probably not. Did I walk every segment? Yes. But the weather was
Yep.
brutal. Okay. I mean, I'm not kidding you. There were people in the bed and breakfast is like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm going to walk this next segment. They're like, you're insane. I'm like, well,
Yep.
I'm heading out.
Reminds me of Ireland a little bit.
Ireland, yep, we're
Yeah.
heading out. So, and I think the long ways is built upon this idea that we're going to explore these things. Do we always do it right? No. Is it fun? Yeah, and I'm looking forward to our Turkey trip.
Yeah.
It's time to get the three of us back on. It's going to be an interesting trail. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to
This
it.
one also though steeped with history with hiking through like ancient Greek city states and ancient Greek ruins along the coast
And
line.
we're going to interact back with Hadrian again. Hadrian's Gate is there,
That's cool.
right?
That's
Okay, and
cool.
now we have like this whole connection, which we
Yeah.
never intended.
Yep.
I'm like, there's Hadrian's Gate. I'm like, huh? I'm like,
Well,
I
you're going
keep
from
forgetting
one end of the Roman Empire to the other. Yeah.
exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
and I cannot wait for us to all stand there and say, well, this is Hadrian's Gate, and I've actually stood at the other end of the empire.
Yep.
Okay,
That's
and
cool.
done that. So it'll be fun.
Well, I mean, I think my last question, like for any future solo hikes, is there anything that you're eyeing maybe next year or anything like that that you want to try, even if it's solo?
I don't know if I want to, I don't know which ones I want to make solo. I think there's
Hmm.
ones where because of our dynamics, you and Eric only get so much time off and I'm pretty flexible. I may decide to do one. There's some ones that I want to look at, but I think I want to save, whereas I did the Hadrian's Wall path to prove to myself I can do it. And I accomplished that. And I'm very happy with that. I think
Hmm.
that solo hikes are things that you have to set out for a reason. I think
Hmm.
that when we do our big hikes, they are things we set out because we want to have fun and we want to explore. And it's more
Yeah.
fun to explore things with the team. Yep, we're all training for it. We're all getting ready.
Yep. We're losing pounds. We're doing miles right now. For me, it's
That's
running.
it.
Um, but we're doing that actually a little bit later this year. We're doing it. Typically, we do our hikes in July, June, July. This year, we're doing it September. I was actually thinking today. I was like, I'm like itching to like be on a trail right now, and it's because I usually do it
I
this time of
know.
year.
I know.
Um,
Yep.
and having to wait all the way till September for this hike has been tough. But it's for the heat and just how everything worked out.
It
Um,
does, but I think we're also going to turn this around really quick. I think we need to do one in September, then turn around and do something again in March or April.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, okay. And I have a bunch of ideas, And the fun thing about the long ways is the fact that you're not going to know what the heck we're doing,
Yeah.
and we're going to have fun doing
Yeah.
it. So
Totally. Well, I think that's going to be us for today. Once again, I'm Devin Windelspect.
now, Mike Windlespect.
This is a Long Ways podcast. We'll be coming back to you with a much anticipated gear episode soon, where we get to talk about our hiking gear, what we've
Yes.
chosen, what we've thrown away, mostly what we've thrown away, what we need to pack
Or lost.
or lost.
Yeah, or what we need to pack.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, what we need to pack. I've
Yep.
learned so much about packing.
So
Yeah.
that's gonna be our next episode. So stay tuned in the next month or two about that. Thank you for listening, and we will speak to you next time.